to just give us a bit of a big picture view at some of the views that we've heard in Parliament today. Some of it quite poetic today, but that's always what we're going to be expecting, Karima. Fanciful, detached from reality, tone deaf, Wakanda. These were also just some of the words that some of those opposition party members and leaders used to have a go at President Cyril Ramaphosa's speech. What did you make of those main messages coming out this morning?
Look, it's unsurprising. The opposition normally uses this opportunity to do exactly that, go for the weak spots and the chink in the armor of the president's speech. But what is critical is that these are supposed to be people that are presenting themselves as alternatives. So I found, especially with the EFF, a complete lack of putting policy positions forward for what it needs to do. And for example, there's a big debate at the moment in the country about whether it is the state's jobs to create jobs or whether they must create an enabling environment to do jobs. And that debate is happening across parties and inside the governing party. And it's manifesting in the approach that we saw President Ramaphosa had. He, for example, spoke about the partnerships that they're having with private sector institutions. That's going to be covering something like 19 sectors, and they're going to be raising in excess of 800 million rand for it. So there's a partnership to create jobs. Then there's people who say, but government shouldn't be creating jobs, and the EFF is demanding that government should be creating jobs. So we need to get a clear understanding of exactly whose responsibility is it to create jobs. If it's a partnership, then we need a social compact, and then we need people to come together and to make trade-offs. I didn't hear any of the opposition parties speak about any of that. So in as much as they're poking holes into Cyril Ramaphosa's speech, and justifiably so, because that is the role of the debate. One would have expected them, given that we're having a local government election in 2 years' time, for them to put some concrete proposals of their own on the table. Because just like they're saying the president told us what we already know, they're doing exactly the same. To tell us people are hungry, to tell us people are landless, is not to tell us anything new. What is the EFF going to do about it? What is the DA going to do about it? What is the Freedom Front Plus going to do about it? The IFP going to do about it? Let's see whose policies have a better chance of being cheaper, being more effective, and reaching more people. That's what we're looking for.
Because the last time we really heard that kind of talk from opposition parties was in the run-up to the elections. But because of the position they get elected into, we can't really see if any of the plans that they put forward would actually come to any fruition.
Absolutely. And this is what the ANC was saying when they said they're happy with the speech, because they said it's consistent with the manifesto of the African National Congress. I haven't heard the DA whip out its manifesto and say, we are saying the following based on why we got this amount of votes to be in Parliament. The same with the EFF. Not that President Ramaphosa's speech doesn't have very, very serious weaknesses, particularly around timelines for the turnaround of plans. Exactly, of SOEs. But here's the other thing that all the opposition parties conveniently forgot. They were at the forefront of campaigning against state capture. They were at the forefront of removing Jacob Zuma. But they now conveniently want to let us forget what Jacob Zuma left in his wake. He left a series of institutions completely bankrupt. Denal, you've just read out, are paying limited salaries. The SABC people chose to pay salaries and not other people. They definitely don't have money to pay salaries next month. That is the legacy that we have inherited.
SA staff are protesting.
Precisely. But what is interesting is the position of the unions, for example. So in the case of Denal, the unions are saying they're blaming the board. But this board was coming in off the back of a board that was led by none other than Daniel Mancha, who is actually now President Zuma's legal counsel. And this is the man whose water bills were paid by the Guptas. So there is a lack of context. There's a lack of the framework in which we are looking at. Should one use the word
empathy, or is that not used in politics?
Not empathy, because empathy suggests that you feel sorry for, or that you have. But what we need to have is institutional memory. We need to have historical context. And it's not old historical context. We're not talking about apartheid debt. We're talking about the last 9 years of a presidency that saw the fiscus being affected to the tune of R1 trillion. It related into the loss of jobs of 1.3 million rand jobs. And so when we're discussing the state of the nation, both President Ramaphosa's weaknesses as well as what the opposition parties are putting on the table, that needs to be the context in which we understand this. We're paying VAT, for example, as a consequence of having to make up for the fact that we have a 57 billion rand hole in SARS. SARS has just gotten a new head, and the EFF, of all people, took Trevor Manuel to court for saying that he has a relationship with this person, and they lost the battle. They lost their right to appeal. They're now going to the SCA. And one of the reasons why they're attacking the new SARS, one would have thought that the opposition party would want the Revenue Service to actually get its money from South Africans, is because many of them are actually implicated. So it's a little rich from people like Julius Malema to say, come clean, when we still don't know how Julius Malema and his brother benefited from VBS. Now, the blaming is also not helping us. I do think that the president missed an opportunity to give concrete plans, and that is largely, Marcel, due to the infighting inside the ANC. It's the resistance that is getting inside the ANC. That's why he used the opportunity to restate the mandate of the Reserve Bank, for example.
Now, speaking of that specifically, there were two of the leaders took an opportunity to take, I suppose some would say pot shots, but I suppose it's Parliament, so that, you know, it's fair game for everybody. Yeah. Maimane is speaking about, or calling on the president, please take the nation into your confidence, tell us what's really behind the Bosasa matter, which really speaks to reform that we've been waiting for a very long time around transparency for party funding. And then also, Musi Maimane couldn't leave the Reserve Bank issue inside the ANC alone. The president, there really is sitting duck in a certain extent, because he's got this Bosasa thing hanging over his head, and he's got massive problems within the ANC that is spilling over into the public eye almost on a weekly basis.
Absolutely. This is a president who needs to get stronger as he cleans up institutions and, of course, as he cleans up the mess that was left by state capture. But here's the thing, Marcel, the people who are responsible for that, they're not running away, they're not forming a new party. They are, in fact, fighting back. And so what you have is an organized campaign of fighting back, which is why, for example, the EFF is going on about SARS, which is why someone like Floyd Shivambu is the person who went to the public protector to investigate Pravin Gordhan. Even though the matter is more than 10 years old, the public protector has still not come and given her reasons. So you actually see the state capture project morphing and getting new allies. So everybody who's implicated in looting are beginning to come together. And this is why the Bosasa matter must be handled with absolute transparency. The president must cooperate with the public protector, must in fact make very clear what exactly happened. And that is why he's asked for the right to cross-examine Musi Maimane and Gavin Watson. And the questions that he wants to ask Gavin Watson is, if you wanted to make a party donation, why did you use the different companies? Now, what is interesting is that the public protector is denying that the DA asked her or rather denying that the DA came to her and said she needs to look into issues of money laundering. The DA is saying they never asked her to do that. So she's already extended her remit, and she's now become part of what you spoke about, which is that internal mess that is in the ANC that's now spilled over into a Chapter 9 institution. It doesn't help her credibility that the courts have been so harsh in some of her judgments on the Estina dairy farm. But here's the other thing. Her latest finding on the former Secretary of Parliament is being questioned by the Union Nihao, which actually brought the case. So she is in a conundrum because, you know, perception really matters in politics, especially when the waters are muddied.
And in the economics, if we think of Moody's and the likes are keeping an eye on just how safe we keep those in oversight institutions.
Absolutely. And many will argue that those who are part of the state capture project are in fact still using certain institutions. And we can certainly see the public protector's agenda, because in all her findings, which she's been criticized for, most of people implicated and that are close to Jacob Zuma get off scot-free. And then, of course, she put criminal charges against the former State Security Minister to access documents. And, of course, she is standing up to President Cyril Ramaphosa. But he needs to, as speedily as possible, take the nation into his confidence, cooperate with her, and put the matters in front of us so that we can get to the bottom of this. Because Bosasa is also one of the companies that were mentioned at the State Capture Commission and had contracts and so on. But the interesting thing that the President also wants to ask Mmusi Maimane and Gavin Watson is, did they give any other people money? And that's going to be interesting to see how Mr. Watson is going to answer it. So I'm very keen on how the public protector is going to deal with the President and how the President is going to deal with the public protector. The public protector is already mired in controversy. The President so far, his bona fides have not been called into question, and he needs to make sure that that remains so. He can't seem to be pulling political stunts like President Jacob Zuma did. He needs to come clean. He needs to explain what happened. But the answers to some of the questions that he wants to ask Mr. Maimane and Mr. Watson will certainly give us insight into how Bosasa oiled the wheels of those they thought could give them politically connected contracts.
And I suppose if he doesn't play his cards correctly, it's going to keep coming back to him in places like Parliament, like we heard today. And indeed, if a State of the Nation address is a place where a president lays down what he believes his legacy should be, does he want the way he's handled this Bosasa matter to be a major stain on that legacy as he heads into his presidency and indeed moves on?